Okay, so we'll be starting this panel on the political evil. I would like to start by thanking Pankaj and Tom again for engaging the CCB in this important and very needed project. It's really a privilege to be hosting you. I'm just very sorry that we're hosting us in Barcelona because we cannot be in Doha. But I thank you very deeply for helping us enriching and enlarging the European public discussion and the public debate. And I hope that this will be just a turning point for a continuing discussion. Thank you, Pankaj. And Tom and the Georgetown team, it's been a pleasure to work with you. And I would also like to thank the CCB team for accepting to do this in such a short notice and for making this house a cosmopolitan refuge, a space for dialogue, for a vital this public discussion, and a space for hope, I would say, sometimes. No, when the world is falling apart, sometimes at CCB we feel that there's some hope. So I'm really privileged to be hosting these three extraordinary thinkers, Maria Stepanova, Echete Melkuran, and Marian Bascuñán. It's a privilege to be here, to be speaking about political evil. In these times of increasing hate, violence, cruelty, rise of authoritarian regimes all over the world, I think it's very important to redefine the political evil, a notion that was heavily described and defined by Hannah Arendt. I would say that one line that connects you, the three of you, is Hannah Arendt, so that you were in phase of three Arendtian. And I'm also doing the promotion of their books. The three of them have new books in the Spanish bookstores. Desaparecer, The Act of Disappearing by Maria Stepanova, a wonderful novel. Echete Melkuran, The Nation of Strangers, who just appeared today. So I'm very happy that she's being now... And El fin del mundo común, a wonderful essay by Marian Bascuñán on Hannah Arendt and the question of truth. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Maria Stepanova, who is, I have to say, Pankaj asked me to say this, to announce that she's the new Global Dialogues Fellow, and she's also the current international resident at the CCB. So very welcome, Maria.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I am intensely glad to be here, and I'm so grateful to you guys for the last 2 days. I can physically feel my mind buzzing and expanding. That was glorious. Closer? I don't need the mic. Glory, glory. I don't need the mic. That's good news. Thank you. Many years ago, in the pre-pandemic era, which seems like a different era from today's perspective, I conducted a small experiment with my students. We were dealing with memory, collective memory, familial memory, the way memory and familial stories get transcended. And I asked them to name the words they closely associate with their family memories or family history. And it came to a striking revelation. The word everyone, I mean literally every single one of them used, and the group consisted of 17 persons coming from different countries with different backgrounds. The word that kept appearing and reappearing was shame. Shame. Today, after many conversations with the young and very young people, it has begun to seem to me that another new common denominator has emerged, uniting them all across linguistic and national borders. And this is yet another word denoting an affect. Only this time, it is not about the past, but about the present. And the word is powerlessness. And it has many synonyms: bewilderment, disorientation, lack of agency, lack of political representation. But the main thing is powerlessness, the feeling that no matter how much you want to you cannot change anything, neither the fate of the world nor your own fate, and also a deep fear of the future and a desire to postpone it. Terror of the future seems to be shared today by all strata of every society, though they express it in different ways. At the level of governments and political leaders, the fear can be masked by slogans promising that the future will be dazzling, just like the past, make America great again. The past that is never described in specific terms, using dates, facts, and figures. And the future is like the past, only much better. In his inaugural address to Congress, Trump promised that his administration would be remembered as the happiest era in the human history. Political regimes of today that I do associate with evil, and I have to confess that I believe in evil, in evil's existence, they differ from those that we know from the 20th century history and our own family histories precisely in their attitude towards the past and future. The 20th century was filled with a shared enthusiasm for this, and the cannibalistic regimes of the 20th century proposed radical projects for a new world whose goal was to break the old models. In the name of this future, the past could and should be destroyed. I'll give a quote that everyone knows. We will destroy the whole world of violence to the foundation, and then we'll build our new world, and whoever was nothing will become everything. But the modern autocracies, like modern theocracies and the hybrid entities in between, are desperately trying to do the opposite, not to destroy but to preserve the status quo, to achieve a stasis that will ensure the current regime's permanence and immutability. Any kind of development is perceived and suppressed as a threat. Another distinctive feature of the current situation is that the new totalitarian regimes manage perfectly well without ideology, or let's say without an intellectually coherent ideology. Putin's rule in Russia has lasted for more than 25 years, and yet it is difficult to say that he has an ideological foundation, a political program, or a vision of the future that goes beyond the phrase "Great Russia, greatness again." The historical arguments that Putin cited to justify the invasion of Ukraine are also primarily emotional in nature. Russian culture, Putin claims, is greater, and therefore its bearers have a right to political and military dominance. Yet, literally everything that has been done in Russian politics over the past decades is defined by a deep immersion in the past. Moreover, not in the real historical past, but in a past that never existed, in a fiction shaped by individual and collective memory. This past becomes the foundation for real political actions, and in this sense, the aggressive war against Ukraine should be considered a war of memory. Here, perhaps, we can recall the first days of the invasion, February 22, when Putin and Russian leadership were still convinced that the war would be small and victorious. So, the so-called special operation, or its beginning, was styled after the wars of the 20th century, with tank columns and fighter planes, just like in 1941. This historical reenactment had a distinctly magical character. Its purpose was to restore the lost order of things, as the Putin regime understands it. The tragic aspect of what is happening is that Russia is operating here within the framework of the ethics of memory as it has developed in the Western countries over the last 50 years, only adapting it to suit its own needs and objectives. The secular cult of the past, which shapes so much in the modern world, is the result of the divergent efforts of numerous social groups, individual projects, and activist practices that have gradually gained greater significance and mass support since the late 70s. The cult of the past attempts to process the collective catastrophe of the 20th century, restore coherence to the world, and give a voice to all that were forced to remain silent. A noble goal. But as the past is valorized, as it swells and grows and occupies more and more space in the present, its value ceases to be exclusively symbolic. Capital enters the picture. States are reawakening and beginning to offer their own official versions of the past. The first competing versions emerge along with the first fears and the desire to enshrine knowledge of the past in legal form so that no one dares to question it. When the first laws regulating the portrayal of the past were enacted in the 1980s, they paradoxically set a precedent for the rewriting of history that is taking place around the world today. The idea that historical knowledge needs the protection of the law or state propaganda bites the hand that feeds it when revisionists come to power and the law begins to serve their tastes and preferences. Sometimes it leads to the exoneration of executioners, as it happens right now in Russia. In Russia, where history has shaped a situation in which no single historical event is the subject of a general national consensus, the ground was particularly fertile for this. But what one could cite, for instance, Poland among the other examples. The law passed in 1998 was modeled after German historical laws and protected the memory of those who fell victim to repression and war crimes. The amendments adopted 20 years later in 2018 protect the good name of the Polish nation and criminalize any mention of Poland's and specific Poles' involvement in Nazi crimes. The memory of the past evokes shame and at the same time a fierce desire to declare that there is nothing to be actually ashamed of. History ceases to be a science and becomes a tool of memory, nation, and identity. Discussion is replaced by demonstration of power. Political struggle, and Russia is just one possible example here, unfolds today not in the realm of ideologies, but in the realm of affects. Consistent formative thought about the future is constantly postponed to the future. The mind is too preoccupied with momentary, emotional interventions that unfold here and now and keep attention fixed on the present. The cult of the past also proves to be a significant factor here. It helpfully offers us analogies that compel us that compel us to see today's catastrophe as a repetition of past events. Having decided for themselves that we are reliving a new 1933 or a new 1938, social media users experience fear, but within this fear lies a secret, comforting sense of predictability. It is a familial horror. We studied it in our school textbooks, and so, or so it seems, we know how to behave in the circumstances, what to avoid in order to survive. That makes the past, even the most horrifying, preferable to the uncertainty that the future holds. So, there is an intriguing picture. A human or humanity now finds itself on a small patch of the present, a tiny island where one can barely stand. And this small patch of land is washed over by an all-powerful force of passions and fears Anger, rage, terror, resentment, despair, envy, helplessness, a force of emotions that cannot be resisted. We are no longer able to see the past as a collection of facts existing independently of interpretation. It is even harder to see the future as a result of intellectual effort, clear thought, collective strategy, the deliberate labor of human beings inspired by the idea of the common good. Discussion about the present, however, look much the same. They are based not on theories and logical reasoning, but on an almost unconscious system of innate and inherited loyalties, sympathies, and antipathies. The political arena begins to function in a new way. Instead of political programs, goals, and results, it becomes a zone where emotional clouds compete: rejection, outrage, the desire to protect one's own, fear, and hostility towards the outsiders. And so the age-old laws of force and survival become the natural, or if not the only argument. Might makes right. Russia was among the first to return to this slogan, but it has found many followers. It is no coincidence that the very word helplessness becomes a grim watchword in the face of a new evil. As you all know, in her 1958 work, The Human Condition, Hannah Arendt emerges as a passionate opponent of the idea of hope or multiple hopes. And her argument goes somewhat like this: hope is apolitical. It compels people to passively hope or yearn for the future instead of actively acting in the present time. Action is replaced by expectation, behind which lies nothing but disappointment and ruin. What Arendt offers in place of hope is what she calls natality. That's how she describes the human capacity for regeneration, the ability to be reborn and start over again and again without hope and without weariness. Blind as grass pushing through asphalt, natality possesses unlimited potential, in part because, unlike hope, it has no plans for the future, no strategy. It does not bargain with the future, does not issue ultimatums. It risks everything and sometimes wins. And it is so deeply rooted in the very core of human nature that it is almost impossible to deconstruct. The idea of natality means a lot to me, partly because I myself have had no particular hopes in recent years. On the other hand, to paraphrase an old author, all hopes are shaped differently, but natality is always the same, and its animal force has an impersonal nature. Every new birth, using Arendt's words, guarantees a beginning. It works just like a human body, adapting to the circumstances. Again, blindly, cells regenerate, a wound heals with a new skin. A person who hopes is a product and result of their era, their class, their individual history. A natal person reduces their life to a single task: to survive. Finding themselves in a historical situation where hope kills and natality is necessary for survival, people lose their individual characteristics and become a part of collective body. In the blinding light of natality, free action is possible, but it is not entirely clear who exactly is carrying it out and what in the human personality will remain unchanged after each new rebirth. There are different ways to view this. During the siege of Leningrad, the writer Lydia Ginsburg, a contemporary of Arendt, saw a higher duty precisely in renouncing one's self, one's personal desires, preferences, and tastes, in the name of self-sacrifice and the survival of the whole, the polis, society, the state. the fact that this entails a loss of complexity, that it is essentially dehumanization, seems insignificant to her. It is an acceptable sacrifice. The old selfish self would only get in the way under the new circumstances. The austere civic spirit that inspired the Soviet citizen Ginsburg and the biological inevitability of natality promised to Arendt's readers share a common nature. They invited person to bid farewell to their old self-image, to the entire luggage of accumulated memories, emotions, and prejudices, and to prepare to travel light. It is a choice that one would like to avoid. I wonder if it will be possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Maria, for opening up this discussion about natality in opposition to hope. Eche, it's now your turn.
I always had a problem with this natality thing from Hannah, because it feels like, she's kind of next generation. We cannot do anything. Next generation will be better. There is a somehow concealment of her own hopelessness. Sometimes I think that in my funny nights. So this thing that I'm going to read has been published in El Mundo a few days ago. I wrote it for Global Dialogues, and it is, ironically, there are bits that refer to yesterday, to Camila's talk and several other talks, and then it is magically connected. All our three, articles are connected. It's beautiful. Evil of banality. One of the mainly tragical, humorous facts about being human is that we understand of our personal stories, make sense of our personal stories only in hindsight. Humanity is no different in this regard. The angel of history can only speak in the past tense. That is why Hannah Arendt coined the term banality of evil 2 decades after the Holocaust. As she observed from the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem, and only years after writing The Origins of Totalitarianism, she was able to see the core of the problem. Eichmann, the man who ordered the deaths of millions, was someone who could not think independently. Before encountering this meek man in Jerusalem, whose main defense was, I follow the orders, she regarded this incomprehensible political evil as something monstrous, something epic. It was Hannah Arendt's mentor, Karl Jaspers, in his early letters to her, who warned her that there was nothing epic about it, and that it was, in fact, banal. The banality of the political act that created the monsters of 20th century became clear to her only after everything was in the past. She published her book in 1963 at a time when the old order of the world was regarded as done and over, and the new world was being assembled. And that is the world we have been living in for the last decades. As this order too is coming to an end, it is time to reverse Hannah Arendt's term. The new order, which is equally, if not more, inhumane, is now built on evil of banality. In the early decades of the 21st century, the problem has evolved. We are no longer confronting the thoughtless agent of a totalitarian regime. Instead, we face something more insidious. The evil of banality is the active, aggressive normalization of the horrific through the weaponization of commonplace. It is the noise of social media that drowns out the cries of the oppressed. It is the influencer logic applied to the demise of democracy. It is the reduction of human dignity to a trending topic that disappears within 24 hours. It is not commanded by a headquarters. We are all in it, doing it together. In this new era, the banal is no longer merely a sign of superficiality. It is a conscious political endeavor. Mass destruction of populations is marketed as bringing democracy. A genocide, broadcast live for over 2 years, is disguised as political tension. The killing of thousands of children is neither hidden nor concealed by propaganda, but acknowledged through statements of deep concern. The perpetrator does not bother to request silence from the audience. They distract themselves with kitten videos. Poor kittens, pandas, or any cute animal obviously cannot understand this, but they have become the tools of complicity. Thanks to them, the audience is led to watch their own rights eroding as if it was a reality show. There is no direct command. We are not more vibrant, we are not ordered to remain silent by a totalitarian regime. Instead, we are offered other, more vibrant sides while the idea of humanity is being torn apart. This signals our new form of political evil. This time, the evil arises from seemingly harmless, almost purely human banality, the desire to remain happy, to survive nevertheless. This neoliberal morality, be happy, has infiltrated every corner of humanity so thoroughly and for so long that we have come to believe this is human nature. This new evil possesses a unique ability to become so invisible that we think we are willingly participating in the evil of banality. Its omnipresence is so overwhelming and cloud-like that we feel unable to pin down the technology that enables it or its origins. But we can. Thanks to the enormously mighty propaganda machine of neoliberalism, we were made to forget the beginning of 1980s when there was, in fact, violence on both sides of the Atlantic to oppress the masses who stood by the institutions of truth, the social state, and human values. During the 1984 and 85 miners' strike, Margaret Thatcher famously labeled the miners as the enemy within. And when the state deployed 6,000 police officers, many using paramilitary tactics, the BBC famously edited its footage of the event to make it appear as though the miners had attacked first, reversing the chronological order of the police charge. Ronald Reagan's firing of 11,345 striking air traffic controllers in 91 didn't just break the strike. A lifetime ban on their employment was issued, which annihilated the middle-class union. These are just two examples. The horror trickled down into the politics of other European countries and eventually into our personal lives. The social contract forged in the 1950s was shattered. The structures that once provided the depth to resist the sanctity of profit and personal happiness, the institutions of truth and social justice, have since been hollowed out. That is how we lost faith in democracy, politics, and ultimately in ourselves. We lost the capacity to change the world so much so that when the Gaza genocide began, some of us, actually too many of us, thought it might be better to look elsewhere. It wasn't because they were monstrous beings. These people were not monstrous beings, but because these people believed they could not do anything anyway. Today, this moral damage, spanning decades, has tainted even those who consider themselves against this neoliberal morality and politics. The most telling sign of this is the craving for hope. It is not hope we lost, but it is faith. Faith in ourselves, in humanity, in politics, and in each other. And the neoliberal values, such as the importance of being a winner, are still present, even among those of us who resist. But if we truly had faith in ourselves and in the power of standing on humanity's side, we wouldn't be so preoccupied with the winning or seeking hope of victory. We would be prepared to make sacrifices as the faithful do. Our own well-being and happiness would then cease to be the core of our concerns. Today's resistance to the evil of banality perhaps needs to reclaim the power of faith from religion to heal itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eche, for this wonderful reflection. I will now give the floor to Mariam Bascuñan. I'm very glad that Mariam came from Madrid. She's a dear colleague and a dear friend, a writer, a political philosopher. She teaches political philosophy at the Autonomous University in Madrid. And she's also part of the editorial committee of El País, where she writes wonderful columns every week. Thank you for being here, Mariam.
Well, it is a pleasure to be here with Eche, Maria, and Judith, and all of you. For me, it is a privilege to share thoughts, fears, and hopes with all you. So I am very grateful for the invitation. I am not sure if I am an Arendtian scholar, an Arendt scholar. What I have tried to do is understand post-truth through her work, to use her concepts as tools to make sense of what is happening to us today. And this is why I found Eche and Maria's text so interesting, because it is applied political theory, if I can put it that way. So, Eche, Maria, thank you for these two powerful and very interesting texts. Both of them use Arendt very differently. Eche inverts her, not the banality of evil, but the evil of banality. And Maria uses natality as a form of resistance. So my question is, can these two readings coexist? Well, I think yes, but with tensions we need to name. Eche defines the evil of banality as the active, aggressive normalization of horror through ordinary things, not through others, not through propaganda, not through distraction, but through kitten videos, through deep concern. And I think this inversion of Arendt's concept is brilliant, but if we read Arendt carefully, I think the banality of evil was never just passivity. It was never just a man who couldn't think. It was a man who chose not to think. And that choice, the abdication of judgment, is already an active dimension. So I think maybe it's already there in Arendt. And if we go further to the origins of totalitarianism, we see that Arendt already understood how normalization works before the terror arrives. So totalitarianism doesn't come all at once. It comes when people upset small things one by one until the common world is destroyed. So perhaps what you are doing is not inverting Arendt, but completing her, taking her farther than she went herself. But in any case, I think this inversion brings Arendt into the present. It makes her even more relevant today. Why? Because today, evil of banality is, as you said, is the noise of social media that drowns out the cries of the oppressed. It is a genocide broadcast live, disguised as political tension. It is thousands of children killed and acknowledged only with deep concern. So there is agency here, even if it is diffuse. And for me, the tension is this. If evil is a political project, we need a political response. So I do agree with Maria that natality alone, beginning again and again, is not enough. You can be reborn 1,000 times inside a collapsing world, and the world will still be collapsing. So this is where I want to bring my own argument. The common world has collapsed, not because we lost hope, not because we lost faith, but because we lost shared reality. And without shared reality, neither faith nor natality can build anything lasting. And what is the common world? Well, for Arendt, the common world is the shared political space where we act together, where words still mean something, where we can disagree and still remain together. So my argument is that this common world has collapsed, not because of war, not because of poverty, but because of post-truth. But post-truth is not only about fake news, it is the destruction of shared reality. We no longer inhabit the same world of facts, and if we live in different realities, we cannot act together. So the goal of the systematic lie is not that you believe the lie, the goal is that you stop believing in anything, and then they can do whatever they want with us. And let me give you an example. When Bush invaded Iraq, he needed a lie. Weapons of mass destruction. He needed to construct a false reality to legitimate his action. That order was hypocritical, but hypocrisy, in a way, is a tribute to truth. It still recognizes that truth exists and that you need to pretend to respect it. So now we are in a different panel. Post-truth is different. Trump doesn't need to lie to bomb Iran. He doesn't bother because the common world is already broken. There is not shared reality left to justify anything too. This is the difference, I think, and this is why post-truth is not just a communication problem, it is a political catastrophe. Maria makes a crucial distinction between history and memory that is very interesting. History is shared, it is based on facts, evidence, interpretation, but interpretation that can be contested, discussed. Memory, if I understood correctly, memory is personal, it is emotional, it is tribal. It says, this is what happened to us, to my people, to my nation. So when memory replaces history, we lost the common ground for debate. We no longer argue about what happened, we argue about who we are. And that is a much more dangerous conversation because identity cannot be negotiated. The interpretation of facts can. So this is another form of the collapse of the common world, not through fake news, but through the privatization of the past. So I find your diagnosis very powerful, but I think we can go further because if we locate, as Maria does, the origin of political evil in neoliberalism, in Thatcher, in Reagan, it is true, but we risk missing something deeper, I think. The inequality, this is true, produced by neoliberalism is real, and the discontent it generated is legitimate, but that discontent was captured by Trump, by Orban, by Meloni, by Milei, and channeled towards authoritarianism. That is not just neoliberalism, that is a political choice made by concrete actors. And this is where Arendt is crucial, I think. Totalitarianism does not arise from economic misery alone. It arises when economic misery coincides with political loneliness, when people have lost the common world and became vulnerable to those who offer them a simple identities and a clear enemy. And today, loneliness is not accidental, it is manufactured. This is the explicit goal of what Peter Thiel calls the dark enlightenment. Destroy shared institutions, destroy shared reality, destroy trust in media, in science, in history, in democracy itself, in us, intellectuals, or whatever we call ourselves. So social media is not a side effect. It is the instrument. It puts us each in our own reality, our own bubble, our own enemies. So when you are isolated, you lose the capacity to trust your own perception, because we need others to validate what we see. We need to say, did you see that? And someone answers, yes, I saw it too. So this is why the Elon Musk moment matters. Many of us watched that gesture and thought, is that a Nazi salute? And then we doubt ourselves until that site published its cover, a Nazi salute is a Nazi salute. So this is the goal of systematic lying, not that you believe the lie, but that you stop trusting your own eyes. And social media does not connect us, it isolates us, and this is the project. So yes, the origin of political evil is neoliberalism, Thatcher, Reagan, the destruction of the social state, and I am saying yes, but I am saying at the same time that this is not enough. There are 2 steps, not one. Step 1, neoliberalism produced real inequality, and that inequality produced real discontent. People were angry, and they were right to be angry. And step 2, something else happened. That anger was captured by Trump, by Orban, by Meloni. They took that legitimate discontent and used it for their own purposes, for authoritarianism, for the politics of the enemy. So that second step is not neoliberalism, that is a political decision. Some choose to exploit that anger in a destructive direction. And then I think here it is interesting to bring Arendt again. She explains why people are vulnerable to that capture. It is not only because they are poor, it is because they are lonely, political lonely. They are lost the shared space where people act together. And when you lost that, you became vulnerable to anyone who offers you a simple story. We are the good ones, they are the enemy. We need to recover the faith, okay? But Arendt gives us something, I think, more political, because faith waits for salvation, maybe from outside. And Arendt's natality says that if salvation exists, it comes from us, from our capacity to act when nobody expects it, to interrupt the automatism, to begin again. So I think here is the difference between faith and natality. And I think we can stop the machine of banality, of repetition, of distraction. Natality is the capacity to say, no, something different is possible right now from us. That is why I am saying no faith, no hope, action. And Maria, you read natality in a very interesting way, but I want to resist, I don't know, your skepticism. I'm not sure if natality dehumanizes us. I think it is precisely what makes us most political. It is not the reduction of the person, it is the affirmation that every human being carries the capacity for a new beginning. So you read natality with admiration, but also, I think, with a little bit of fear, maybe, I don't know. If I understood correctly, you say, yes, natality is powerful, but it is the capacity to survive and begin again. But there is a cost when a person reduces themselves to pure natality, to pure survival. They lose their complexity, their memories, their emotions, their individual history. They become part of a collective body, not a full human being. You call this very carefully a form of dehumanization. I like very much how you use the example of Lydia Ginsburg during the siege of Leningrad, a person who renounces their individual self in the name of collective survival. You see something uncomfortable in that. But I'm not sure if natality is not about losing yourself. I think it is about the opposite. It is the affirmation that every human being, as an individual, carries something irrepressible inside. The capacity to begin something new that nobody else can begin. And that is not the dehumanization. That is the most human thing there is. I'm not sure if natality is generational, neither. Arendt's natality is not about youth. It is about the human capacity to begin at any age, I think, in any moment. Every action is new, it is a new beginning, and that is the point. So Exe asks us to reclaim faith, Maria offers natality, but I think they are, we can go further, because faith without institutions is just emotion, and natality without a common world is just survival. So we need maybe more faith, we need more resilience, but we need to rebuild the common world, the shared political space where action it is still possible, where words still mean something, where we can still disagree and still remain together. And this is what Arendt called the public space. And this is what we had lost, I think. So the question maybe is not how do we resist evil. Maybe the question is how do we rebuild the conditions for politics itself. And I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariam, for this wonderful response. Maria, you define evil and the beast, as you call it in your book, as the human capacity for violence. Eche, you've defined evil as the neoliberal morality, no, and this destruction of the common ground. And Mariam, no, you define evil as this destruction of the common space, the shared space. One of the questions that always strikes me when we talk about this is the popular support for political evil. No, we've discussed this with Maria many times. Maria was telling us how 50% of Russians, 25% are pro-Putin. 25% would be against Putin, but 50% of the Russian population would be not indifferent, but kind of silently approving. In Losing a Country, Eche tells how the silence of her friends, no, was this, no, light support for the regime. No, no, we were talking about Trump, who had 70 million of votes in the last elections, and this always reminds me of Etienne Lavoisier, no, the voluntary servitude. No, how can, I mean, we understand the processes of this popular support for these regimes, but what can we do for that? No, how can we resist this voluntary servitude? How can we fight it properly?
Does it work?
I think you have
we all know that it is an enormous question. We cannot really answer it. We can try to start answering. And I might make a couple of points to put something on the table. And maybe I would start with something that Mariam was describing, the loss of political space, the loss of common ground, the loss of a sense of collectivity that gets quite close to the sense of solidarity. and that becomes more and more of archipelago as the identity politics is developing in a certain way. We have not one human solidarity, but a number of different solidarities that are attached to certain modes of self-perception. The solidarity of the, I'll be imagining, the university workers or people belonging to a certain community, bigger and smaller. But the solidarities of the communities that are perceiving themselves and presenting themselves as oppressed. And it is a total truth, because in the current situation, everyone, besides, well, certain forces that we register as evil, everyone is oppressed. But what Hannah Arendt describes in People in the Dark Times is a certain problem that is connected to surviving in the hostile world where politics as it should work does not exist, and those who are oppressed are clinging to one another in the search of warmth, in the search of support. And it is an extraordinarily strong and encouraging feeling. But Arendt perceives it as a danger because the strength of understanding, the strength of support, paradoxically prevents this community from a conversation with one another. And that is a serious problem because, to resist, we have to be united. And it makes me think about something that Omar was describing today, and it was strikingly interesting. He was speaking about this negative feeling of having to explain oneself, having to translate oneself in the language of someone who dictates the way you're being perceived. And it is excruciating and humiliating. But in the same mood of trying to engage ourselves in a different kind of a conversation, could we find a context where this inner translation of one's own values, one's own positions, one's political claims, one's history, one's memory, into the language that could be open to the interpretation of someone that comes from an absolutely different background? Does it have to be negative, or is there any possibility for some positivity? Because, well, the last two panels were eye-opening, and in a way, I suppose, because it gave me a chance to understand much more about the way China operates, about the way the Arab countries, the Arab world is seeing itself, than I could, hope and expect. Maybe we should come back to the utopia of a constant interaction, even if sometimes it means that we have to flatten ourselves a little bit for the sake of a bigger cause, for the sake of building up a space that would be belonging not to the set of communities, but to something more general, a community of humans. Sorry for the pathos, but it seems to be, to me, it gives a certain degree of hope in the world that feels definitely broken.
Okay, I'm being told that we have to go to Q&A, but maybe while we wait for the first question, Eche, you can respond.
Few months. I don't know what's wrong with me today. two of my friends use AI as therapists. So this inspired me to ask AI, what do you think about people using you as therapists? And AI responded, marvelous question, you know, it does that. And then after praising me a little bit, it said, you know, people use me because they're embarrassed from, you know, of humans. I think there's a bit of financial reason there as well. And then I asked, like, what are the most common problems that humans bring up to you? And it said loneliness and, well, actually, first one, self-worth and loneliness. I tend to trust AI about these things. So I think the biggest problem today is loneliness and self-worth, which both of them comes from this neoliberal morality that we have been imposed upon. So, since yesterday, of course, not since yesterday, all of us always think about this. Why isn't there any action? Why aren't people doing anything? I think I told this yesterday as well. There are enough ideas about what to do, how to do it, to the minute detail of it, to be honest, you know, technologies, political technologies, as Veronica would call it. And there is enough outrage, there is enough inequality, and there are enough number of people, enough majority, to change everything, actually. So why isn't this happening? So every one of us is asking this question and trying to bring answers. And you say that it's not faith, it's not natality, it's action. My question is, what is the obstacle before the action? Why aren't people acting? And that is why I constantly bring this faith thing. But then, now, listening to you, I was thinking, maybe I am thinking in reverse. Maybe I am thinking, what would I, you know, what if they had faith in themselves, in the future, in their capacity to change the world? You know, I'm trying to heal. I'm not trying to understand. Mm-hmm. Maybe I should not do that. Maybe it's not intellectually healthy to do that. But I feel the moral responsibility to do that. That's why I'm bringing up faith. Because if they had faith, things would have been different. And then, of course, there's this reality, I think, for all of us. We know what's going to happen, or let's say we know what should happen, and that thing is a very, very bloody thing. You know, to change this power, to change this entire setup, there'll be a lot of blood spilled. So we know what's going to happen, and it will require a lot of sacrifice from so many people. I think that is the threshold we don't want to go towards. Or me, in general. This is what's going to happen. But then, yeah. I was going to say something else, actually, but I forgot. Anyway, let's go to the questions.
Any question from the audience?
Yes.
Paul?
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. My question is for Mariam. You spoke of the loss of a shared reality and of the common civic space that Arendt had characterized. I wonder if putting things that way concedes the point to the people who wish to dominate us. These are terrible times, there's no question. The United States and Israel went to war on the people of Gaza and then went to war against Iran and then went to war in Lebanon. That said, these are not popular wars. The war that the U.S. and Israel have waged in Gaza has led to significant outcry against Israel, such as has not existed since 1967. The United States and Israeli war on Iran has not been popular for a moment in the United States, and it's producing all sorts of electoral pressures in our country. There are tens of thousands of people gathering in the major European capitals. Wouldn't it be more accurate to say that we're contesting for these common spaces? We're trying to maintain a shared reality rather than to say that they've already been lost, which, again, I fear concedes the point to those people who wish to dominate us.
Yes. I do completely agree with you. That is why I thought this notion of common work by Hannah Arendt, it was a very interesting point, because the common work is everyone looking at the same reality, and if we don't agree that climate change, for instance, exists, we cannot even discuss it. So if we cannot agree on basic facts like climate change, like there is a war, like Trump is an authoritarian person, debate becomes impossible, and politics also. So I don't know. I don't have like a complete answer for how we could recuperate this kind of acting together, but I think this notion of the common work is a starting point. We need to rebuild the institutions of truth. I think this is the most important thing now. Journalism, education, the spaces where we still share this reality and we can act together. Not because they are perfect. Journalism, it is not perfect. Intellectuals are not perfect, but because without them, there is not a common work. And without a common work, there is not politics, only power. And that is what is happening now. And I want to say something also about our role as public intellectuals, because we are no longer the public opinion makers. That space has been taken by influencers, by Elon Musk, by Peter Thiel, by Curtis Jarvin. So they have this project. They have a project. We need one too. And our task, it is not only this diagnosis. Our task is to rebuild trust, to recuperate trust in a shared reality, trust in institutions, in democracy, in the idea that thinking together is still possible. And I think this is not naive. This is very political.
Any other question or remark from the audience? Nisrin.
Thank you. I had a question. I was discussing this with Gavin earlier today, and forgive me if this is going to sound a little bit addled, but it seems to me that there's a banality of evil, which is challenging and difficult to get one's head round, but there seems to be now a new form of expressing evil, which is almost kitsch and comedic and almost performing a cartoon villain type of character. And so you, particularly over the past few weeks since the war in Iran started, you have these grotesque videos that are being posted by the White House portraying the Iran war as a video game or as a sports show. The press conferences and the kind of political statements have become gamified, sportified. There is a almost, how can I put this? I warned this would be addled. There is almost a difficulty in trying to reconcile the seriousness and gravity of these evil actions with the triviality and performative clown aspect of how it's being disseminated. So we don't even have the cohering sane-making performance of like a properly serious evil figure, right? Yeah. So someone who's going to make a really terrifying speech, expanding on white supremacism, for example, or someone who's going to make a truly organized, chilling address about how Muslims need to be eradicated. There is a sort of circus element to it, and I find that more challenging than grasping the fact that evil is banal and everyday and not particularly thought through or deliberate and enacted by everyday people. There is a Hollywood entertainment aspect to it. It feels like there's a recycling of tropes as well about power and evil, and it feels like there is and actually one of these videos was genuinely a newsreel that had, Top Gun and Harrison Ford and Star Wars, and there's just something really strange coming together that feels like a combination of dystopian science fiction, 1980s Cold War dramatizations of nuclear annihilation under mad scientists. I just would like some help with that, please. Thank you.
I think radical loss of shame, that's a step in how to lose a country. This shame, when you talk about shame with Westerners, they always stigmatize shame in a way. I think it's about church, it's about something, I don't know. But shame is a necessary component in social and political life. And this radical loss of shame has happened with the post-truth. Actually, these two concepts are very connected. The truth could not have been lost had the shame was there, had the public shame was there for politics, or political shame was there. And I always connect both of them, truth and shame. And thanks to that loss of shame, now we are looking at it with disgust, but also we laugh at them. And this incredible confidence of pulling bits of narratives from Cold War, from science fiction, and putting them all together. That schizophrenia itself is the epitome of post-truth, I think. About post-truth, though, you say that this is the source of evil. It's not only a side effect, but also the instrument, which is so true. First of all, social media was used during Tahrir, Gezi uprising, actually in Spain during protests. When there is street protest, when there is politics on streets, off streets, whatever, social media is another tool. But of course, Elon Musk, as you said, is a very important moment, and now it's everything is different. Anyway, back to post-truth. As you said, there is a reality, and we have to move forward one step further. And I find it very precious that you talked about these things. But I also thought that maybe while moving forward, we have to assess the reality and move with the reality. And reality being now, thanks to the radical loss of shame, we are in the age of believing, unfortunately. That is why there are so many different realities, because everybody can believe in anything, which comes from the myth of the impossibility of antagonism in capitalism. When there is free market, there would be no antagonism. So we're in the age of believing. Everybody's allowed to choose and pick from the open buffet of realities and so on. So in the age of believing, that's why I keep on going back to this idea of faith. As public intellectuals, we have a moral responsibility to either trust, as you said it, refresh trust and faith, not only in ourselves, or truth, but also people's faith in themselves. I think people need this. Otherwise, they go to AI and talk to AI. I mean, imagine this. Many humans today are talking to a machine to feel worthy. What kind of a failure is that? What kind of a political and moral failure is that? So going back to shame thing, You know, probably you know this from your part of the world, Nesreen. It is coming to this part of the world new, like last 15 years or so, this lack of shame. And Epstein files is a very good example. Nothing happened because of Epstein files in United States, but in Europe, somehow the establishment was shaken, including the aristocracy, which is a little sliver of hope, I think. There is still shame, probably.
Last question from Maxime.
I'm very interested by this idea that's come up of loneliness animating the power of these new narratives that are coming up and the sort of the evil we see around us. What I wanted to ask was, is your sense that the shamelessness is connected to the loneliness? In other words, is an environment of loneliness one that is conducive to shamelessness, or are they two separate phenomena that we're seeing at the same time?
I think it's very much connected, of course. There is a certain hormone probably when we, induce when we see each other face to face, but social media especially played a good role. I think you're going to say something.
I was thinking that, as it goes for the last 2 days, there are 3 points or 3 components: loneliness and then shamelessness, which derives from a certain brand of solipsism, maybe. And then it leads inevitably to the loss of social space, to the loss of political space, to the loss of the shared reality that Mariam is talking about. So, yes, it all comes together.
We have to leave it here. Thanks so much for that lively and interesting conversation. We'll continue after lunch. Thank you.
Thank you.